And we are live. Drew, we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Surf Sessions. This is episode 10, so it's a little milestone for us here. My name's Anthony Green. I'm here in sunny, or actually pretty foggy, California today. I lead the sales team here at Surfside. As always, I'm your host for today. For those that don't know Surfside, we're an advertising technology company. We help cannabis brands and retailers to advertise their business and brands compliantly online. Today, I'm stoked to welcome Drew Cesario, marketing advisor at Jaunty. Welcome to Surf Sessions, Drew.
Thank you, Anthony. Good to be on.
If you're joining us from New York, then there's no doubt you will know and love this brand. They're a New York brand and they are number one in their category right now in New York. So if you've been to New York, you visited a dispensary, I believe, Drew, in the prep room, you mentioned 80% coverage. So, if you've been to a dispensary in New York, you would have come across Jaunty. As I said, number one in the vape category, edibles, tinctures, dabs in their product line as well. I'm going to give Drew you a quick introduction, but I'm going to pass to you to add some color here in a second. Drew, thanks again for joining. You're a highly experienced marketing executive, lots of cannabis experience, but also lots of non-cannabis experience. You got like Bev Alc background, tons of other verticals and companies you've worked for in the marketing space and the revenue generation space over the years. So again, super grateful to have you here today. I'm really happy to get stuck in. But before we do, any other color you'd like to add there?
No, excited to kind of go through your questions and see what the audience has. Yeah, excited to be working in a healthy market of New York.
Yes, well, we definitely covered a little bit of that there in the green room, I guess we call it. And yes, folks, we will be taking questions as we always do, because we always do these live. So welcome everyone again, and thanks for joining. If you've got questions, feel free to ping them as we go through. That's fine, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. So let us get started. Drew, I always like to start at the beginning. As I mentioned there, you started the first portion of your career in the sort of Bev Alc space, stints at big brand houses that folks would know, like Pernod Ricard and others. So thinking back and throwing your mind back to those earlier years, what did you learn early marketing in those categories that you've been able to bring to your subsequent roles in cannabis and specifically what you're doing at Jaunty?
Sure. I would say I would take it even one step back. My first job out of college, I worked at a agency called Epsilon, and I managed the email marketing for Target and National Geographic. And having the data, and this is back in 2007, to understand what's happening there was really influential. I worked that job for 3 years before I realized I couldn't be inside of an office every day and left. I need to do something more fun. But having that kind of data first approach that was instilled in me there, and then taking that to Pernod Ricard and Bacardi and the agencies on record there allowed me to understand how do we use data and patterns of behavior to influence consumers to make easy choices in our direction. And so certainly those big influences matriculated into choices around merchandising for sure, and how Southern Wine and Spirits and Pernod Ricard and Bacardi merchandise and trade marketing and how to influence the trade from a point of actually supporting them versus really looking to influence, build great relationships, add value to their lives, and then that will of course just cascade goodwill. And so that kind of is easy to really translate into cannabis, which has much more of a familial culture as well and appreciates that.
Yes, I love the data first, learning that early because we're such sponges early in our careers, and so getting that really early foothold. I actually started in email marketing too, mate. I was selling an
Yeah.
email marketing technology many, many years ago. So yeah, it's good to get those early runs in and have that instilled in your DNA moving forward. How do you view this? Is something that's pretty close to our hearts at Surfside. The convergence, if you like, the opaqueness between the Bev Alc world and the cannabis world, and things like hemp beverages obviously are enormous right now. So, from your background, your unique background, your extensive background, do you see I mean, is convergence a word that you would agree with? Is that too strong a word? How do you see these two sort of coming together and playing together?
Yeah, I think myself included, when I saw working out in California, cannabis coming online and becoming recreational, I thought it was going to be a much more one-to-one than it truly is. Standing on the outside, it certainly looks very, very similar.
Hmm.
And you have strong players like Nabis almost creating three-tier systems naturally. Um, and I thought it was going to be much more similar. What's actually, I think, to the benefit of cannabis is that it is so regulated.
Mm.
And so it focuses the marketer and the decision maker of the customer into very few touch points of where they're going to actually purchase and make a decision on what they're going to do. And so when you're working in alcohol, you have to play against strong social media presences and influences there and non-alc, and all these things are happening in different touch points and influences across a much broader, like they call it omni-channel marketing, right? For a reason, because there's so many options. And I think it's actually a luxury to work inside of cannabis where the consumer's decision point is either happening inside the retailer or on their website and maybe a little bit on social media, but we haven't seen a tremendous amount of data of influence of what they're following online translating to behavior of purchasing in store or through the online store. So I think that that's actually a great luxury while we're still building this industry to have limitations, because that allows us to be better and focus those dollars in a more specific area.
Makes sense. So, mate, from those early days, you came into the cannabis space a little while ago, I guess now.
Yeah.
Cabana, NorCal Cannabis, now with Jaunty, the number one selling brand in New York. So congratulations, mate, and congratulations to you and the team. I mean, that is no mean feat in maybe the best market in the world currently. So that's amazing. Well done. That's why I wanted to have you on today. What are the areas, broad question, but what are the areas you focused on yourself from a market through a marketing lens primarily to achieve the growth and to get that status?
Yeah, I think that certainly like sales is the result and symptoms of everything else. And we are lucky to have a really strong operational team.
Mhm.
Certainly in other places, just out of stocks killed us, and not understanding of the value of like investing in working capital and understanding like the finance side of it. So I get to stand here and be like, oh, I'm in charge of, the best-selling vape, but really it's all the back end work that's non-sexy. That's a result of having us have the opportunity to be the best vape company out in New York at this moment. I think from a strategic sense across like sales and marketing, we early on bifurcated teams of in the field. Of one was field marketing and one was sales, understanding the push-pull relationship and affording ourselves maybe a little more investment on overhead, but ensuring that the retailers knew that there was not only somebody selling it in, but there was somebody solely dedicated to moving out of their store. And so making sure that we're investing in merchandising, making sure that we're investing in training and sampling, and we're just going to be there to ensure that you're going to see sales velocity. And that's what we can actually lean on more than anybody else. In fact, if you look at headsets data throughout any month this year to date, every one of our 17 SKUs that are distillate vapes are in the top 30 SKUs in the state. Like no one else can say anything close to that because there's only 13 other SKUs left. And it's because we have focused on making sure that we have really great talent density, pushing it in and supporting them as a retailer, and then their staff and their team moving it through the store. And I think that those investments early on have really paid dividends and continue to. And we've got great coverage across the entire state doing that. And then, certainly working with partners like Surfside, looking at what are the channels that we can lean on in a very administratively light way to generate return on investment for advertising, because that's something that I can just shoulder the burden of. We can have a couple meetings around, we can see great return on investment. I mean, people probably wouldn't, and maybe you'll talk about it later, like the ROI that we get Surfside is bananas. So it's great to have partners that are offering those options for us as manufacturers.
I'll leave you to share the numbers, mate, later on. But what do you think the hardest part of that is? The planning of that, because the game plan sounds comprehensive,
Yeah.
relatively straightforward. So you guys had to plan that way back. You've executed on it now, continuing to execute. Now you got to maintain, right? Because you got a bunch of, I mean, you know this. There's a lot of vape brands out there, and there's a lot of competition. What's been the hardest part? The putting the plan together, executing it, or sort of maintaining it?
We just became the number one spot this year, so certainly maintaining it's relatively new for us. I think that there's really great brands and people across the spectrum that are putting out good products. I think because of the fact that we're controlling our inputs all the way through, we can make sure that our costs are there and so that we're able to go to market with a great price point. So that fundamental part has allowed us to maintain good offering of quality at a great price.
Mhm,
That makes my job really easy.
mhm.
And I think saying no also is really hard too. The field marketing team always is like, I'm encouraging them to say no to more stuff um, because everybody wants, you've got to say no more often than you say yes. And it's easy to get distracted from shiny things like events and things like that. And they have their time and place. I think Revelry is a great event that we just invested in pretty big that I think is worth investing in. But all these other smaller investments from time to time can just bleed you dry. Saying no there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no shortage of events. We go through the same thing. But yeah, I want to get to Revelry. I'm a long way away, but I heard it was amazing up a few weeks ago, and there's one in the city I think coming up. We're actually going to be doing more at that ourselves too because it's New York. It's pumping. Mate,
Yeah.
digging into the New York market. So, we chatted a little bit before this and a couple of weeks ago about this, and I think we have share some similar perspectives on it, but we also differ. And you have a keener insight than I because we're nationwide, and I'm sitting here in Cali. You're there, and you're in the crosshairs every day. I would say it's new, exciting, and growing. I think you'd agree generally with that. But what are you seeing? Where are you seeing it, and where are you seeing it go? I guess we'll start there. Like, what are you seeing today in New York? Market conditions, market dynamics, and then maybe the next sort of 12 months or so.
Yeah. As we were discussing a little earlier, what's interesting is that according to the OCM's own reporting, in August of 2024, there was 184 stores that did $109 million in retail sales. In April of 2025, there was 357 stores doing $117 million. So the quick math shows that although there have been great months that have seen spikes above this, overall, when you look at like 9, 10 months difference, and it has only grown by $8 million and the store count has doubled, it's a tough time to be a retailer, and it's really a good time to understand like what are the financial models important for them to make sure that they can be healthy and successful. It's going to be tough. I mean, we all know this. Like any veteran that's been through a state, and I worked in California to see it open up and then like really hit its own maturity, if maturity is really where we're at right now. In California, it's going to get tougher. So I see that eventually probably more regulation will come and it will create a healthier market. But at this moment, we probably need more black market stores shut down and enforcement action happening to see a healthier industry open up. The fact that we're doing less in sales than Massachusetts, which has 7 million people, and we have over 20 million people, and we're doing more than $20 million less a month in retail sales just tells me we need more enforcement action. Like
Are people just don't
that's
smoke weed in New York State? Come on, Drew.
I know.
Yeah, it's. I think from my perspective, I'm always astounded that there seems to be no lessons learned from other states, and it's just somewhat the same playbook,
Yeah.
where there's too many like retail locations, price compression, uh, in Cali here, as you know, like there's some definitely cream has risen to the top in some of these retail groups out here for sure, but there's a lot of folks struggling, and it'd be great if we could figure out a way to not have that happen in New York. Sounds like it's kind of going down that path. What do you think retailers can do? And this is a tough question too, because some retailers are in smack in the middle of Manhattan and some are out in more regional areas of a big state. But what are some of the high level things you think they can do to try and weather some of the storm and the increased competition?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's really the unsexy stuff. I think it's minimizing the days on hand of inventory,
Mm.
and that would actually help and free up cash flow on a big, like that's something we coach a lot to retailers that are willing to listen. And then I think working with really smart partners that are going to provide a level of service and insight that they just certainly couldn't do in-house themselves. So working with Surfsides of the world, working with headsets of the world, be curious and lean on their teams to give them insights around what their product mixes are, or what are additional ways to drive traffic. For Surfside, and I'm sure you can speak more intelligently to this than I can, is going to help you deliver more traffic. And it's going to be a very administratively light lift for you to lean on them to do that.
Mhm.
And things like headset and the retail suite of software that they add is going to tell them like what is really selling there. And then how do I just make sure I don't go out of stock so I lose customers? What is my churn rate on product at sales velocity? If they just like, if they, I think a lot of times people, there's a really good book called The E-Myth Revisited. And in it, it uses like a baker talking about how a baker typically is a bad owner of a bakery. And I think a lot of retailers are passionate about like flower and cannabis as a whole, but that doesn't mean that they're a good retailer. Those are very different skill sets. There's a lot of financial administration, a lot of like legalities and accounting and like, human resource management, all that. Like that's super unsexy. And I don't want to talk about it. And they probably don't want to talk about it, but it's the difference of them being profitable or not. So I think spending some time looking at those things, making sure that their cash is going further, and instead of having this whole great section of products that they love versus the products that actually sell, and leaning on partners that are outside of them to do work for them, like Surfside's team will do work for them because they're going to deliver really like more customers for them. They're going to most likely beat out their competition geographically because of
Yes,
doing
I
those
love
things.
that. And you heard it here, folks. Surfside will work for you. Uh, you mentioned digital, you mentioned online. You've
Yeah.
got your whole brick and mortar experience. Obviously, you've got to, figure out with all your various retailers. But on the online piece, what are you seeing with online sales for your products across New York today?
A really interesting stat that I had just heard is that there was in some regions of New York, 43% of purchases were happening actually not in retail, but through pre-orders. And so I was actually like, should I tell everyone this? Because I think that's kind of an advantage for me to think about
I've heard this
versus
once or twice
sharing.
before in New York, but you've
Yeah.
confirmed it now.
Yeah,
So it's too late.
I think that it's like really a fascinating stat because if people are just like Starbucks, they look at all the revenue that opened up in that blue ocean of like pre-orders for
Mm.
people.
Mhm.
And if people are smart about like investing in the pre-order, which is what is the customer journey there online, making sure they're serving ads and right at the top of those tiles, um, that's probably where they're going to see a lot of incremental revenue driven. I actually haven't even put this into place yet. I'm going to talk to your team and other teams about it. So everyone on the call is going to be fighting me on the exact same marketing dollar spends on this, but I do think that it's worth sharing that those are incremental places where they can fight and have their dollar go further by understanding the consumer behavior, like in those journeys. Like that's an interesting stat.
Yeah, and when you don't have a D2C brand, right, it's a way to your point, gather that data, get some insight into the customer that you guys can definitely leverage. I know at the moment you are, I mean, 80% coverage in the state, right, for the brand. Lots of others coming, I'm sure, that are opening soon. And as we've said, there's lots more retailers opening. But you're on, I think, about 20 menus right now. Folks like Housing Works, Happy Monkey, Route 9, some great retailers, some great customers of ours in New York State. You've touched on this. You're serving. Can you explain a little bit more about what you're doing there and what those ads are providing you in terms of driving ROAS or sales and what insights maybe you've been able to gather into your customers?
Yeah. I think by leveraging a little bit of like, Surfside and also Dutchy and some other platforms that allow us to invest there to have as much reach as possible, we're able to, on a very light lift, meet with the respective teams that are offering these digital marketing services and digital advertising services and make educated bets each month on where we should be investing these dollars. We're seeing with you guys, I mean, 70 times ROAS, which is nuts. I mean, even if you take and you back that out because it's off of retail sales and you pull out, okay, it's wholesale sales, that's still 35 times ROAS. Like, I don't know, take out profitability, okay, all that. Like, we're still looking at a great dollar times the ROAS is nuts. So, the consumer insights from a demographic data perspective, I still don't have a firm grasp on like exactly who our customer is. I think that we play a very different, like almost like gender agnostic, like income distribution agnostic, like brand in the way that we're positioned. Like who doesn't want, like just the way that even our titling and our coloring, like just kind of, I think resonates with consumers a little bit more broadly.
Yeah, it's
Um,
approachable.
yeah, it's approachable. Like we make a good product at a great price. Like we're just looking to have fun. I think that that's kind of like our whole ethos. In backing that with actually some of the data from Hoodie and looking at demographic data around like zones of where we are, it tells us that we resonate a little bit more with slightly affluent to affluent. But I think that might be only skewed because we're doing really well in certain zip codes like New York and Manhattan itself, and they are using regional income data to like come to those conclusions.
Mhm.
But we actually pound for pound do pretty well like out in the rural areas as well. And in fact, Western is a powerhouse for us. So I think leaning on again like the platforms that are available to do the digital advertising and then like having weekly or not weekly but bi-weekly or monthly meetings to review what's happening
Mhm.
to like how else can I spend an hour of my time a month and then potentially get 35 times ROAS like no other time.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Mate, what about the consumer, the New York consumer? Because in some of the stats you shared, it's clear that the crackdown on the illegal dispensaries out there, I don't know when that was, a year ago or so, resulted in a lot of those being shut down. But then those people that were buying there have just basically gone to buy in the black market. You've always got, the loyal consumers who are happy to always buy legally. You've got a bunch of people that it's going to take some time, but you got that group in between as well. You've got to educate. So you get a lot of still inexperienced consumers out there, inexperienced of buying legally, walking into a dispensary and being, I'm walking to the travel agency. It's beautiful and there's products everywhere. It's like, it's confusing for the consumer. So what are the trends, folk looking at your consumer now, what are the trends that you're paying attention to? Is it, product type? Is it their demographic? Is it various purchasing behavior, regularity of purchase? Do they skip around different brands? Are they loyal to brands? Like what are you, even if you don't have it all at the click of a button right now, what are you endeavoring to really dig into so that you can understand, all those various New York consumers better?
Yeah, I definitely look at all the available data that we can and that we pay for.
Mhm.
It was interesting to see the last few months on headset that vape has been contracting a tad. And it wasn't just like this nuance. It went from 28% down to 26, which doesn't sound like a lot, but across a couple million, $100 million, that is a trend that in other mature markets seems to go in the opposite direction. As
Mhm.
markets mature, they go to people end up, especially consumers get more looking for convenience. that they end up using and purchasing more vape. And especially with New York being such a, I think there's like 75 million tourists that visit New York a year. Like you look at that, and this most people are not coming in and buying like eighths and quarters for those kind of weekend trips or 1 week trips. They're buying vapes, they're ripping it, and they're tossing it because they don't want to buy all the accessories for it.
Mhm.
So maybe they're buying pre-rolls, and that's still a significant portion of the pie.
Mhm.
But that was interesting to see. Additionally, I do think like there is people are starting to trade down. You'll there's this like really interesting component that most vape manufacturers across the state are always trying to think like, how do I get the most dollars out of the consumer in one purchase? And so even we are exploring like what are larger formats, right? Like our disposables are 1.5 grams and they're doing an incredible job. We've got 5 SKUs and we're like 6% of the market. So every SKU is 1.2% of the market, which is kind of insane. But most people are like, well, what about a 2 gram, 3 gram, even I'm hearing 4 grams? But people want to trade down. In fact, everywhere else in consumer packaged goods, if you're in New York, maybe people are used to seeing like Tate's cookies, and instead of buying the bigger Tate's cookies, they're trading down for like the sleeve. And so it's people are used to hearing shrinkflation in the sense of like their food on their plate at a restaurant, but that's actually happening across CPG where people are looking to buy more luxury and higher end quality products, but they're buying them in smaller sizes. And that's supporting trial, and it's supporting like actually the fact that they have a finite number of dollars per month to spend. And so they still want it, but they're willing to actually get less from a quantity standpoint because they have less in their pocket.
Mhm.
And so we're really exploring like how do we cater to that contraction, um, and offer what we do. Our gummy 2 packs, which isn't that really profitable to like manufacture, but they murder it because who doesn't want a gummy 2 pack like thrown in right at the counter? Like, of course, it's like an easy impulse purchase.
It's like a loss
Yeah,
leader for you. Well, is this is just sounds like overall economic impact as well, and
yeah.
purse strings are getting tighter. People are feeling the pinch maybe a bit more economically. So, I was going to ask about 12, 24 months down the road, the consumer then. It sounds like you're definitely already planning for that, and you've got a plan you're executing to make sure you've got the right products at the right prices for the consumer if things continue to be a bit more economically tight.
Yeah, and I think that just that's what happens in these markets, these rec markets, is people are looking to reach economies of scale, buy market share by price compression and win there. I don't think that that's anything to like, not share. Like our goal is to be the biggest so that we can afford the price compression when it comes.
Yeah.
We've got live resin coming online and we want to play everywhere the consumer is interested in like buying innovative products at a great price. And I think what's also interesting is that actually as price compression happens, let's just acknowledge that the bigger market here is actually the black market, and our concentrates cater to the black market because although they're at the high end of the black market's pricing, they can go get legal, tested, and let's just remember like everything inside of a cannabis shop is like organic because of
Mhm.
the nature of what's required. That product regulated for what is in the high end of the black market. And so we actually see some categories that still technically blue ocean in the regulated market because the price compression will eventually help us bring the black market inside of the stores because they're just not going to go in and spend $100 on a gram of batter. Like they're not going to regularly do that. So I still think that we're looking to double down in New York, win here, and build a moat based
Mhm.
on the understanding that things are going to get tougher here. So why take our eye off the ball?
Yeah, mate, I love it. It's a smart plan. I've got one more question for you, and then I've got a couple of questions. But folks, if any, a couple of questions have come in, sorry, from the audience. But if other people have other questions, ping them in now. We'll try and get to all of them. Um, Drew, if you were a new brand starting out
Hmm.
in New York, I know you can't give can't give the house away, can't give everything away here, but what would you say, in terms of like focus areas around the marketing advertising side. I know you've touched on some of them, so sort of summarizing some of those points, but budgets are tight, lots of competition. Obviously, the first thing they need to do is get out there and get the retailers, and but then how do they support ensuring sell through and reorder and growth of their brands?
Yeah. I mean, it's really tough to come into a market, even as new as New York, if you're just not there early.
Hmm.
I would say, massive, watch what you're spending dramatically. Like, ignore non-buying consumer events completely. Like, just be allergic to them and look at like where you can trade $1 for $3. One of the most successful brands in fashion is online. It's called True Value Tees, and they've got a really great art episode on marketing podcast about how they or it's True Classic Tees, how they really got into the nuances of their return on ad spend and baked everything in, including returns and costs. And so they knew truly what their ROAS was. And so I encourage anyone that's going to be launching a brand to know what your numbers truly are and be relentless about them and be more conservative about what they could be. Because I think once they spin up, things are expensive, and it's cool to buy hats, and you want to walk into a store and see bud tenders wearing your stuff, but that probably isn't the best investment that you could make starting off. Making sure that the trade is educated about your product and it's well positioned, and then probably play geographically dense. I would, maybe not even start in Manhattan, but win in another dense area, or Long Island, or Brooklyn, and then just fan out from there. A great partner of ours, Foy, who makes incredible edibles, they're really winning and adding 20 accounts a month, and they're really just starting their journey in building. And it's because they're just focused on the founders are out there selling to stores bit by bit, and they have the relationships that they can then turn over to a team. And so they're investing directly in those relationships with their dollars and their time. And anything that is not going to turn that dollar into two after all costs are baked in, just absolutely get comfortable saying no.
Would you say non-buying consumer events? You said,
Yeah, which is
are you
all.
giving shit away for free?
Yeah. Are you going, to the trade or anywhere? Just anything that is just not going to be transactional. You just have to be totally transactional to begin with. And then you can think about the billboards and all the cool shit that might come with it. But I'm very allergic, and I think my team has become too, to anything where we do not see it a net positive 3-4 times return on spend. And in fact, we track our field marketing team's investment in the dollars of time and the resources they put into each store, and how does that accumulate over time, and are we investing or underinvesting, overinvesting per month at that granular level. And yeah, good luck to anybody starting a new brand.
Well, yeah, you've got to measure that. You've got to make sure you're investing in the right partners, right? And that everyone's sort of throwing in and getting a mutual return. So folks, skip all of that too good to be true stuff when you're launching a brand. You've got to get into the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. And Pareto principle the shit out of it, right? Where are people, what are the real retailers that are winning, and investing your time in the relationships there? It might take you longer to sell, but they're going to have less AR issues. That's, they're going to ask less of you. And that's where you want to be, is that continuum. 25% of our accounts, we advocate for classification of A's, just in our own monthly refreshing rate. And those consistently produce around 56 to 58% of our revenue. So we're not at that total 80-20 Pareto principle yet, but we're there despite the market continuing to grow.
Mate, amazing work, amazing success. Lots of work to go, I'm sure. Before we wrap, got a couple of questions. You've already answered this, expansion to other states. The focus is New York. You've said that. Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We want to build a moat because we just want to be the biggest guy in the room so we can afford to play long term.
Hey, there's lots going on in that state. I lived in Manhattan myself, as I told you, for a decade, so I know it well. Someone's asking, actually, Alex is asking for the name of the book. It was E-Myth I wrote down. What was the name of the book, Drew?
Yeah, the E-Myth Revisited. There's the E-Myth the original, but the revisited one has got a lot more density to it. It's a fantastic book.
All right, that's on my list too, Alex. And then Lorne, last question, and we'll let everyone go. We'll wrap up here. You mentioned consumers benefit from testing and organics by buying retail from a dispo and not the black market. Help me understand how they are buying organic products in New York. How much is truly organic? My experience tells me consumers buy on three factors: price, bag appeal, and cost. That's a good question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'm just saying is that like the products that are being grown have to essentially be how do we would test in the food side of things organic in the sense that they're not using herbicides, pesticides, and some of the regulations there. So anything that's showing up is going to be tested by a third-party lab, so long as it wasn't Lexichrome, because they just got closed last week or this week. And they're going to provide you anything on that shelf should be third-party tab lab tested and organic by those definitions. And then we can kind of get into the whole soil runoff of outdoor planted products and all that heavy metals. But you're right to look at those classifications of price and potency. And was it package date or what was the other P?
I closed the window. Now you got me. Hang on.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
other P I would.
price, bag appeal, and cost.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean those are definitely it. Well, it can't be price and cost, right? Or we'll just say potency, but yes, you're right to think of those as like the primary levers, but the black market being untested, mostly using herbicides, pesticides, there's just no like incentive to offer an organic product in the black market because you you like don't get rewarded for that from a dollar price perspective.
Well, it's more fun for me, at least, and for you, and for most of us to go into our local dispensary anyway. I love going in there and having a chat and seeing what's on and specials they've got, new products. It's a great experience. And I browse online before I go into, as you touched on, 43%. Amazing stat for New York, mate. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we've gone a little bit over time. So we will wrap up. Brings us to the end of the wave. Drew, want to give you a really big thanks, mate, for
Yeah.
imparting so much information. A little bit of a New York spotlight today, but as I've said, what you in your career and your time at Jaunty have achieved is remarkable. I know the future is really bright for you guys in the business. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best? What's the best course of action for folks?
Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn. That's
LinkedIn.
good.
All right, you'll find Drew on LinkedIn. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Drew. We look forward to welcoming everybody on June 25th is our next session with Perpetual Brands, so another brand focus. But until then, Drew, thank you, and it's bye for now.
Better, Anthony. Have a good one, man.